I met the godfather of methamphetamine for New Zealand.
Wow.
In a case. And we had dinner with his associate. And I had portrayed that I was the owner of the restaurant, and essentially everyone in the restaurant was an undercover. I ended up standing up and I yelled as loud as I could. I was acting as my right-hand guy, a Romanian. Excellent guy. I had whispered to him and I said, hey, can we have one of your guys come over? So he called over one of these big bodyguards. And he goes, do you mind if we say the word cocaine in the restaurant? So then I stood up. I went, cocaine! Because I knew everybody in the restaurant was an undercover, which made the guy who was a formidable adversary, if you will, his eyes were like two ostrich eggs just sitting there.
I'm Steve Murphy, DEA Special Agent retired and now host of the Game of Crimes podcast. If you've seen the Netflix series Narcos, then you know my story. I now bring you stories of heroism and bravery from our law enforcement and military heroes, and occasionally from the criminals that they faced. Welcome to Game of Crimes. Hey, gang. Welcome back to part 2 of this week's episode of Game of Crimes with Murph in the Morning. Our guest this week is Chris Diaz, a 27-year retired professional law enforcement officer. The last roughly 23 years he spent as a special agent with the Drug Enforcement Administration. If you joined us yesterday, you heard about his career, and I even got to the part where we were at the end of his career. You heard about the challenges with his family, his wife dealing with cancer, his son dealing with epilepsy and autism. And we even got to the end of Chris's career because I wanted to get into specifically a law enforcement undercover operational strategy that Chris came up with that I've never heard of before. And when I heard about it, when he was telling me about it on the pre-call, I was just amazed. And it just brought back that pride of this is what DEA does. They think outside the box and they come up with ideas of how to attack these different trafficking groups. And this is very unique. So just to get us started here, I want to let you know that Chris has some extensive undercover experience, even before he started what he's doing, the story we're going to talk about here in just a minute. But we kind of went through it. He's worked undercover in Romania, Tanzania, Portugal, Peru, Chile, Colombia, and then of all places, Kazakhstan, which is the former USSR. When we started talking about that, he even started saying things to me in Russian. I think he cursed me out, but I was too stupid to know what it means. So I don't know. But first of all, Chris, welcome back to Game of Crimes, brother. I can't tell you how excited I am to have you back.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So if you remember yesterday, folks, the last place that Chris was stationed with DEA was in Houston, Texas, working for Javier Pena. You know who Javier is. He's the guy I look up to. And you came up with an idea on an undercover operation. So let me just shut up and if you would tell us where you came up with the idea and what that involved just to get the thing rolling.
So it was about around 2018, 2019. I was invited into an investigation. It was an HSI run investigation. And it was targeting CJNG upper echelon. And during that invite, being that I had experience operating in Guatemala and having an understanding of the transiting of drugs from Venezuela to Guatemala and being taken into Mexico, I was asked to participate on a potential interview. Well, it was an interview, but a potential opportunity of a target in Mexico who had never left Mexico or the area that he operated in, and he was considered the Willy Wonka golden ticket. This was the last guy, and it was an impossible ask. And so I have done a lot of cases where it had an international angle. I've worked a lot of CIs, and have done undercover prior, but on this specific case, the team that was created, it was already in motion. You had HSI, you had U.S. Marshals, and you had a member of DEA, Scott Higgins. I actually asked him if I could say his name. And Scott Higgins was there, and Scott invited me to participate in an interview. And through that interview, it was determined that the individual who was the principal golden ticket for HSI, who would never leave Mexico, they had some cursory evidence, but we didn't have an overt act to have him indicted, let alone try to extradite him, etc. And so during that point, we were able to cultivate a CS, and through working CIs in my career, kind of learned that at a certain point, sometimes CIs, they can do very good work, and sometimes they're okay crooks because they're sitting with us. And sometimes they don't tick all the boxes. And a lot of times when you're dealing with the golden ticket target, you don't have very many opportunities to talk to them or to meet with them. And so that's when we started creating this concept of the CI having access to a higher level target who had access in a European market. Now, CJNG at the time was very progressive in the sense that they were reaching all over the world, different areas of the world that hadn't been capitalized by these criminal organizations. They were very progressive, very good at what they were doing. And this specific target was very good at shipping goods globally to the United States as well as around the world. So during that conversation with the team, they thought I was bananas, but I figured that there was a way that we could create and have an opportunity to have this individual be so enamored with an opportunity. And the concept of, if you look at it as a corporate structure, they would have an opportunity to follow the vein of their global expansion, but to go globally through us, through the European Union. And that's what we ended up doing. And then which ultimately led for me acting as an undercover, having a U.S. nexus as well as access into the European Union. And so the U.S. nexus played the part for the overt act, which this individual would do personally. And therein lies the challenge. Many people who are higher in the organization, I think, Steve, you can agree with, those people have many underlings who they can do taskings and have those individuals carry out orders, which is good. But what's better is to have a boss want to show his worth, his weight in a business opportunity that he will personally take responsibility, and he's stating that it's personally coming out of his hands and through his orders. And that we were able to do that, which led to the overt act, which led to us receiving drugs. At the time it was methamphetamine, and then which led to further conversations of us traveling to the European Union, sitting down for dinner, where I, in turn, as a corporate structured boss who had access to the criminal underworld in the European Union and would be able to help him in his expansion into the European market without the cost. Spain and Amsterdam are frequently utilized as ports of entry, but they're very expensive. And so I was offering just a better rate, just doing business at a better rate.
Wow. So are you still based in Houston?
Currently, yes.
No, I mean, at that time you were working out of the DEA Houston office.
Yes, I was at that time. Yes.
And you used an informant to get an introduction to this guy?
Correct.
And if I get in too far into means and methods, tell me you don't want to talk about it, okay? Because I'm not here to divulge anything, but I think the world knows we do wiretaps and we do informants.
Yes, for sure.
Did you meet this individual, the big guy, face to face?
No, on this specific case, I did not. I ended up conversations, veiled photos where you don't show your face, that type of thing, where he in turn would show photos. For example, it was a very benign conversation. I look at it from the concept of anytime you interact with somebody, you talk, at least in the drug world, you do 80% drug talk and 20% how's the weather, how's your, what's going on in your life. And typically it ends there. And so what I had done previously on other cases and working other sources for me is you have to kind of crest through that glass ceiling, and you need to be able to talk about family life. So my ability to communicate with that target over the phone and just talk about we're going to go meet in Romania. Well, why go to Romania? Well, ultimately it ended up being, he had a fixation for hunting. Well, in Romania, you just so happen to have red deer and an exorbitant population. I think it's about 4,000 brown bear over there. Yeah, no, it's this huge hunting industry, and also a lot of wild hogs, like enormous. So that hunting industry, with his affinity for hunting, we would just share pictures of different hunting events, and he would talk about his prowess, that when he hunts, he doesn't bring any food with him because he only eats with what he kills on his ranch, etc. And so it's just a back and forth bravado between two individuals, and which ultimately you end up talking 80% bravado about everything but the deal. And then at the last part, it's like, oh, well, let's finish talking business real quick, but more focus on the friendship development and rapport building.
But at that point, it's a done deal.
Yes. And my boss has had a different challenge with that, but like in general, between us and the bad guys, yeah, that's how it works.
So you enticed him to go to Romania?
Yes. His goal was to be able to have access to the European Union. So during us talking, I offered him a doorway. A door is just access to an entry point to facilitate his trafficking. So I offered him and pretended to be the king of Romania, and that I had criminal underworld, not all, but some, because the only person who says that they have limitless authority are people who are pretending to be, pretending to be bad guys. So,
right.
Not all, but some authority over there as a criminal element. And that I could reduce his costs by 75% because you're adding additional travel time. But through that doorway, through an alliance with me, that he would be able to get his product in safely, and then we could aid in transportation. The European Union is kind of like entering the United States. Once you get past the original checkpoints, it's kind of, you can go through any country. They're not compartmentalized as they used to be since they unionized. And so we were able to talk about that.
And we're talking hundreds or thousands of pounds of methamphetamine, right?
It would be, originally it was several hundred as just to start, and then it would be limitless as long as we had a relationship. And then instead of receiving cash payments, I'd be just receiving product, which is what that world, how they operate in.
How did you convince him that you could reduce his expenses by 75%?
Well, it's an untapped territory. Romania was an untapped territory at the time. Doing study of what the current rates were in Spain and Amsterdam in that criminal archetype structure that is known, knowing that going to Romania would be more challenging because it's additional time you have to pass through Turkey and as maritime shipments, because it's not air, but it's by maritime. And there would be additional time. And so the more time when it comes to moving a widget from point A to point B, the more time it takes, the more you are potentially at risk. So more people would pay, more organizations, if you look at it as an organizational model, would pay more money to have the widget land sooner versus it adding additional timeframes and additional potential stops at different jurisdictions of inspection, if you will. And so knowing that area is untapped, not used, at least for countries, Central and South America, the Middle East, that's another story, but these are shipments from Central and South America or from the United States. It's an untapped market. And so that is the concept that was floated and accepted.
Did he ask for, so you talk about maritime units, he's going to want to see your boats or your whatever conveyances you have to ship, right?
Kind of. What I have found doing this is that it depends on what level. There are questions you can ask and questions you can't ask, right? And so also dependent upon how you're introduced and by whom. You know, the ability to represent yourself at equal level or a higher level of capacity than the individual you're talking to puts you at a more of an alpha capacity. And then that person is either equal standing or below you unless they proclaim that they are of a higher stature. And typically in that industry, because I look at it as an industry, those who are in an executive type level already understand these rules of communication and questions. So there's really the framing of me being, one, giving access, two, having an opportunity, and three, throughout the investigation, that individual had several failures occur. So he kind of had a pie on his face, albeit that we're the ones who created the failure. So it never reached me as the fictitious bad guy. So then he had to prove himself even more, which would lead to a sit down meeting. When you're doing business at hundreds and hundreds of kilos, you don't just do it. It would probably be wise to have a sit down and have a conversation face to face, old school. And albeit everybody pretends to be old school, but when they do texting, I've noticed that doesn't matter what organization, the upper level guys love emojis. They'll do like a little heart emoji or a happy face or a little salute. It's funny. Obviously, there's a building process, several asks, because there's always a give and take. Show me and I'll show you. But if they say they're going to show something and they're trying to saber rattle about how powerful they are and how progressive they are, but yet they still can't accomplish what they're saying because of what we're doing, the sleight of hand magic, or I call it a poor man's carnival trick, that gives us an elevated status of like, hey, you can't even cross the street. How are you going to cross the ocean to come sit down and meet with me? And so, which leads people to have to prove themselves even more. It's human nature. It's not a secret. Especially with those who consider themselves successful and those who want to be taken seriously and be respected. Right?
Well, I love the fact that you're taking off a couple loads before it ever gets to you, and he still wants to deal with you. I mean, talk about the greed and ego factor that we always capitalize on. That's a perfect example right there.
Yeah, 100%. It's ego and definitely greed, and it's human nature for people want to, in that industry and the narcotics and that criminal element, there's a level of obviously greed, but there's also a level that they want to be respected.
Yes.
And not just respected, but they want to be taken serious as an individual who manages a business or a company. They're just choosing that world of criminal element. That's what I have found. And so that's kind of the adaptation or model following these unwritten rules, or sometimes written, and standards that are out there for people at that level.
Did you consider other countries, or did he come up with Romania? How'd that happen?
No, actually, I thought of Romania. We discussed it with the team. At the time, it was HSI, U.S. Marshals, who, by the way, both of them were amazing partners. Both of those groups were amazing. It was an amazing partnership. And they had trust and they believed in the process of, hey, this can actually happen. I met somebody in a medic class and who actually ended up going to Romania. And I reached out to him, and I figured, knowing, working with other CIs, knowing that that's an untapped part of the European Union that nobody can have access to. One, the language is difficult, plus the infrastructure of potential mafias in that region are kind of untouched a little bit. So it's difficult for criminal organizations to get access to that. And so having that, and then also having a connection with somebody who is at the embassy who potentially could make something happen and work with host nation counterparts was important. So I ended up reaching out to him, and I said, hey, listen, is this something that you'd be interested in supporting? And he was all in. It was great. It's a one-man office. You had a CA and you had one man, and then you had an FSN who was phenomenal, Foreign Service National that assists DEA. And then we were able to arrange a meeting, and I'll be completely straightforward. All the cases that I had done pretty much unilaterally, that's just DEA and my partner, and then working with DEA in a foreign country. Of all of those cases, this one, all the stars were in alignment as far as bosses, GS, and at one point, my buddy Scott Higgins, who is the partner in the case and kind of the lead case agent for DEA, he was acting. So, of course, that helps.
Smooth as skids.
Right? Smooth as skids. And then from there, our ASAC was Lee Nash. And and Lee Nash was, I always remember him every time we would pitch him a case, he just would say, forget about it. I just want to see the show.
Yeah.
I want to see the show.
He was very aggressive. He was very enforcement minded. And that's what you need to be.
Very open-minded. Open-minded. And I remember he actually turned around. He didn't say a word as we pitched it, the region. And he turned around, he got his computer, and he's looking at the computer, and he pulled up Google Maps. He's like, I don't even know where Romania is, because you want to go over there. Admittedly, in our agency, there are guys that like to do narco tourism. I don't know if you've heard that. Like they'll come up with, hey, I'm going to go to whatever country, and then they'll go set up they'll have an interview, but while they're there, they might take in a site or two. And this was operationally geared, to the point where we're going to have a United States agent working in person to facilitate this deal in order for this target to travel and to land in that country. And that's how it kind of kicked off where it kicked off all of our stories.
So this is CJNG out of Mexico.
Correct.
And how high up was this guy?
It was like you have Mencho, then there was a tier, and then you'd have this guy.
Okay.
So he was like a third tier, and HSI came up with that. And I think that was a very accurate depiction. In fact, when there was a big roundup when he was arrested, it was like 600 CJNG guys, and he was the one global. I was actually asked, let's just throw a date, say it was January 1st, and I had already had extensive conversations with the target to travel to January 1st, that we would pay for his tickets for January 1st, and we'd have everything. We'd have the caravan for January. January 1st is the day hammered in. And then I remember like a week later, my boss came up and he says, hey, listen, DEA is doing a global roundup. Can you have him fly in on January 4th? I was like, January 4th, what are you talking about? We just have set this up. And he's like, well, no, we want him to be part of it. So it could add on to so it could be like a global roundup, of it. And so I just, you do what you're told. It's not for us to question why, it's just for us to do and die. And so, when it comes to dealing with persons of interest or targets in an undercover capacity, when you say something, you have to follow through on that. And so talk about a tap dance through a minefield, trying to figure out a way how to logically make it sound okay for, even though I've been discussing January 1st for X amount of time, and then have to just slide it 3 days for January 4th. good thing that it was accepted, and it worked out. Funny thing, though, is that target had an affair on his wife, and she caught him, and she was pregnant, or this is a little bit earlier. She had caught him, and then when he told her that he was traveling, she burned his passport. And so obviously you could see the challenge. Now here we have this whole thing and sliding days around and so on and so forth. And to convince him to make sure that he gets his passport was a very important deal. Cause if you can imagine, you were a big time manager, the funding to just have one person travel, let alone multiple agencies working together, everybody having to have their own funding pots, per diem, hotel, if a vehicle needed to be rented, whatever, logistics, also working through our agencies that do the proper coordination, the judicial coordination with foreign countries. It's very important to get that all lined out. It's a lot of logistics, and to have him get caught cheating on his wife and she burns his passport was a bit of a monkey wrench. You can't make it up. You can't make it up.
So did you fly to Romania and you were there for the takedown?
Yes. I was able to fly there. And I actually, was the, myself and the HSI agent. We were, obviously we're guests in other countries. And so the Romanians did an amazing job receiving him as he got off the airplane, which I might say arrived 10 minutes early. So I got a chance to say that our deals went right on time. And they received him, and he brought his wife and extended family and the brand new baby, which that was, you kind of don't want to see their families kind of get swept up in it, but they were swept up in it. But he ended up getting arrested and detained. And so myself and the HSI partner, we were able to sit down with him in the interview, introduce ourselves. And albeit I talked to him on the telephone and spoke to him in Spanish, he didn't really put two and two together. Probably adrenaline was a lot. And then that led into us, following the rules and procedures of the Romanian government with regards to him as a target and arrestee.
What was his reaction when he found out who you were?
Just kind of shock and dismay. It's a great quote on a later case. He's the president of the Undercover Association for the European Union, and he came out of, if you will, retirement. He was like an SES, and he came down and did undercover with me to make sure everything went well on this other case. And the quote is that when people look at you and they tell you you betrayed me, well, that's kind of an impactful statement. You did your job, and my buddy, who's a friend now, from Portugal, he says to betray means you had to belong. That's the greatest compliment an undercover can receive, is to be told that you betrayed somebody. And I think it's an interesting way to frame it, and I like it.
Yeah. And you're doing your job. That's what you're getting paid to do.
Absolutely.
The bad guys know we're out there.
Yes.
It's just, can they not control their greed and ego to the point where they line themselves up to be arrested?
Right. And going back to the concept of this new, I wouldn't say it's a new concept. It's just following, if you look at the archetype of a business structure. Discovery is part of our litigious nature. Everybody has an absolute right to active and vigorous defense. You and I had talked at my family, part of my family are defense attorneys, and I believe in someone having a vigorous defense. And through that, you get discovery. How many DEA was created in the 70s? Prior to that is BNDD. How many cases have gone to trial? How many attorneys have asked for discovery? All the information out there that has been documented, rightfully so, presented before the public. And so the concept of, if you will, that it's nothing new that we're doing. These are things that have been going on. It's just a different structure. The structure of why do I, as a guy, need to be somebody at the bottom of the pile, having to work your way to the top, which inevitably in a corporate structure, most, not all, is the CEO really going to meet the guy and sit down for an intellectually stimulating meeting about future business growth with the guy that's potentially an intern or somebody new, a stranger, a mope. Is that guy going to sit down with him? Probably not. But if there's a business opportunity by another business head of another organization and they want to have a conversation about potential growth in business, maybe they're going to meet. So there are glass levels all through these groups. So that's where the concept of why do we have to be the guy introduced from the bottom? Why can't we just pretend to be the top?
Yeah. I love the concept.
Yeah. And that's kind of what we tried to put into action.
Did you have like an organizational name that you had to come up with, or where did he think you were based out of?
No, we had ties to the United States. So I was a USC, a United States citizen who, through illicit human trafficking and other drug trade trafficking, made inroads in the European Union. And he was an aficionado of women. So Houston has, if you look at from the mindset or the filter of human trafficking, is a very big human trafficking place. So that fell into common sense. And he was familiar with with that. And so the ability to say, hey, I'm over in Romania, I have these contacts and they work for me because of being prolific at what I do and good at what I do globally. Let's talk business, and just like in any sales pitch, you're really not selling the pen, right? Isn't that the famous thing? Sell me this pen from the movie, Wolf of Wall Street, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that moment. You're just selling freedom. You're selling access. You're selling what headaches do you have and how can I resolve them? And this has just so happened I'm in the U.S., but I am also here as well.
Yeah. And what was the final takedown? What were some of the numbers? You got this guy.
Oh, we ended up picking him up, and he had been utilizing the United States as a trampoline on his previous seizures that HSI was managing prior to DEA involvement. And they invited DEA in. He had a global expansion into France and into New Zealand. And obviously he was using I believe it was U.S. Postal Service, and he was using ex-military personnel to transport drugs from Mexico into the United States as well. And and we also had information with regards to drugs being sent over into Amsterdam area, but they had been seized and he was having challenges. That was one of his headaches. And that was something that we could help out with.
Jeez. Did you say that over 600 people were arrested in the roundup?
Yes, I believe that was the number. I don't know how they came up with it, but I know at a certain point they came out with this gigantic number of CJNG operatives, and our guy happened to be a global figure that factored in. And that's my understanding. It was purported to me that he was one of the reasons that was called global, and that's why it was important to slide the date a couple days over to the right.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, congratulations on that. That's a fantastic operation. Jeez. That's, again, like I said, I had not heard that strategy before, so excellent job.
No, appreciate it.
Well, let me ask you a couple questions about working undercover. So what part of undercover work was more exhausting for you versus being more dangerous?
So I found doing street level undercover, where you go to the Walmart or to the Target, to whether you pick up dope or you do a money pickup, I found that to be very, very, very dangerous. And for me, the exhausting part was doing more of a long-term daily contact, pretending to be a business head, a head of a criminal enterprise. It's more exhausting, but it fit well within the structure of family life. You know, like as you had talked previously and on other episodes, like it's not a 9-to-5 job. And when people call you, you need to jump, or maybe you want to go do surveillance and it could be 14-hour days, 18-hour days, or maybe you want to go pull trash at 3 a.m. And so it's just this constant. And as a special needs dad, that's a really challenging thing, because here's my wife who's recovering from her challenges. She's managing my son, who's on the autism spectrum, and she has the full day. So you get up, I go to work, and my wife is carrying the family, or if you will, carrying the boat. And then when I get done with my job at 5:30, 7:30, I get to come home. And then that's when my real job starts, right? My wife gets to decompress. She gets to go get some sleep, and then I manage the nighttime. So the ability to switch when we first started doing the concept of let's look at international targets versus just CONUS or continental United States targets. Cause the manner of investigating is different. Like you don't have the ability to just go sit down with a guy in Thailand over at the Ruby Tuesdays on a Wednesday morning, whatever. So you have to structure it by telephone calls. Well, if I'm up at 2 a.m. making sure my son's not having a seizure, I'm up. And I can make a telephone call. If I'm calling somebody in Romania, that's 8 hours ahead this morning for them. So I was able to operate on their time clock and be able to be present in family life at the same time. And I will say that I had a great team that they really allowed me the space to explore doing this undercover international gig. Cause it did allow me to be at home with family, and it allowed me to do work. And it was very, work intensive, because with every telephone call, there's a report, and every report you have to be very thorough. So I would make a 15-20 minute telephone call, and then I would spend the rest of the night writing out the report, because I know the next day I'm going to get a phone call. Like you can't not answer your telephone because you got reports to write. You're a bad guy. Yeah, you have to answer the phone.
I love it. Was there an undercover lie that you had to use so often that it kind of started to feel natural to you?
Yeah, I would tell people I had baby tigers.
Why?
Because I think it's funny.
Okay.
I think it's having worked in Guatemala and worked in Laredo, Texas, you get a chance when you do these international type cases, or working with CIs who have stature in organizations. You can see what new money is like: gaudy jewelry, ostentatious cars, furniture that looks like should be in a palace in Dubai, but it's in a 2-bedroom home. Like the guys would have golden thrones at the dining room table. It's just crazy, that type of thing. And so just seeing how some people in that criminal element, how they would operate, you have to kind of adopt a little bit about it. Not all of it, but just a little bit about it. And so that would be something that was a big thing in Mexico. And the one case with the Zetas, one of the targets had a caravan, and he would carry baby tigers, or he would carry tigers in his caravan. And then when he wanted to intimidate people, he would take somebody and feed it to the starving animal in front of them, and therefore to use intimidation, etc., but also have this tiger as his pet. And so that would be something that I would pretend I would have a tiger. That was something that just fodder. It goes back into the how's your life doing versus the 80% just only talking about dope all the time. So I would just talk about that, or just different trips, etc. But the baby tiger one, or baby monkey, I used to like saying that too.
I mean, that you got to use that humor to maintain your sanity at some point. It helps you get through the weird times.
Absolutely. So, but like the targets too, they're funny. That you get along with them, you start talking with them, and they have their own lives. Yes, are they incredibly bad people, ruthless? Absolutely. But you have to get past that and get into the humanity of it all. And then they would laugh that you have a pet baby tiger or baby monkeys. And, and you can sit there for the first 5 minutes talking about how the baby monkey shit on the floor of the kitchen. And now your wife's upset because you have problems too. You're a human being as well. Even though you're a potential global head of a criminal enterprise, your wife can still get mad at you. You know what I mean? It's just little things like that.
Yeah. Was there a particular habit from your undercover life that it took you a little while to unlearn once you got out of the undercover role and retired from DEA?
I would say that I would be, that's a great question. I've never been asked that.
I mean, I know lying is part of it, being secretive.
Being secretive, like for the concept of lying, right? When I was operating, was I at a certain point pretending to run several countries? Now, obviously, that's a lie. But the fact of the matter, when I was dealing with people, all of the information that I was talking about, shipping industry, trade, economics, gold, mining, gold extraction, explosives, weapons, all of the information I was dealing with was true. It was all truth. Now, was I actually a guy wearing a Kazakhstan hat with a shield and swords riding a horse like Genghis Khan? Not entirely, but like I'm not that person. I've accepted that almost like as a role, and everything is so scripted out the way I like to do things. So that wasn't that difficult because I really wasn't lying because I was telling factual information that exists in that world. I guess for me it was hard not to walk away from the tempo. The concept of the undercover role, it's not just the undercover role, it's you're also double dipping as an agent and you're doing the undercover work and you're having to do the writing and you're having to do coordinating and then you're having team meetings because team members have an incredible amount of work that they have to do as a support role. You have funding. So there's an unbelievable tornado of minutia and support, and that everybody wants information yesterday. And I think the hardest part of walking away was when you walked away from that, then you're in it's an odd feeling of this. There's something has to be done, but you don't have to do it because you're not doing it anymore. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
That was definitely something difficult.
So just to change gears a little bit here, because we mentioned that you're intricately involved now in autism awareness.
Yes.
Has autism advocacy, has that made you more vulnerable than undercover work ever did?
Like showing feelings or vulnerable as exposure to potential previous criminal element?
Both.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm talking about the one thing I learned through whether it's autism or cancer is that nobody talks about that. And the worst place to go to get information is online. And, you go online, you end up falling into a rabbit hole, and through the rabbit holes, you just see misery. And so what, as far as being vulnerable with feelings is you have to be able to come forward. I mean, I teach police, fire, and rescue about autism diagnosis, identification, and try to have a little empathy with the caregivers, and most of all, the ability to de-escalate scenarios, which is kind of starting to become more public knowledge, or training is becoming more available for those in the public service industry. And, you are vulnerable about that. As far as doing undercover, whether it's terrorist groups in Central America to Hezbollah that we worked to outlaw motorcycle gangs, Hells Angels that we were able to work to West African country, politicians, coups, etc. Everything we did is judicial. Everything we did is public information. It's prepared for court. I've had to testify. In the United States, you don't hide behind a curtain. And the internet is a wild thing. People can research you and find you. And everybody that I have investigated in that capacity, they know who I am. So, yeah, I'm here. And that's the cost of doing business. Just like every other agent and every other officer who's done undercover or just being an agent, it's that risk that we all have taken.
Yeah. Yeah. So as a family that deals with autism personally, right there in your own home, what do families dealing with autism, what is it that they wish the world understood better about their child or whoever is suffering from that?
If you meet one child on the spectrum, congratulations, you've met one child on the spectrum. It's a spectrum. Autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder. It's, if you look at it like a rainbow, a real rainbow, the refractions of light, the colors are not just solid bars. They're kind of they're blended together. So not every person on the spectrum is the same, but there are threads that kind of tie it all together. And not everybody who's on the spectrum is going to be like Ben Affleck in the movie The Accountant. He's a forensic accountant. He's incredible with numbers. He's quirky and he's an assassin. Like he's this skilled guy. Or The Good Doctor. It's a show where the doctor walks in. He's noticeably different, but he can look up at the sky and he can do surgery in his head and find that sliver of a glass shard in the aorta. Not everybody on the spectrum has that. Some people are still have to have challenges with potty training or eating or can't walk into a room with specific lighting and it causes an unbearable meltdown. That, for example, my son, it took 14 years of hand over hand, which I held the toothbrush or my wife and his hand was on ours in order for him to be able to learn to shape him and for him to be able to learn how to brush his teeth. So I'm happy to say that my son can brush his teeth, right? So everybody's different and not everybody's like what you see on TV.
Right. So what I'm getting out of that is you can't pigeonhole everybody with autism into one little hole.
Yes.
They all have their variations, I guess would be a nice way to say it.
Yes. And you have to have patience and calmness. Patience and calmness. And I could talk all week about that.
Yeah. We don't have that much time. But it is extremely important. And important enough to the point that you have made somewhat of a career after your life with DEA on promoting awareness, right?
Yes, for sure.
Excellent.
For sure.
So let me ask this question. What's more important to Chris Diaz now that wasn't so important when you were a younger man?
Oh, family. I had aspirations. I wanted to run DEA. I when I was in Guatemala, we did air interdiction, man, being in the Blackhawks, landing in a clandestine airstrip in the Petén, in the jungle national forest, seizing cocaine. And that was just the best. That's exactly what I thought about doing when I was a patrolman taking reports about a pumpkin being smashed, or just even mentoring other people. I very much enjoyed that. But definitely I do remember my last action as an undercover agent, was 11:30 a.m., December 31st, the day I retired. I made my last phone call. 11:30, that same day. At 1 p.m., I walked out of the building alone. No fanfare. Granted, it was a holiday, but still. I asked the security guy, "Hey, do you have to escort me out?" And he said, "No, man. Give me your government card and sign these papers and on your way." And I did. I walked out of the elevator. I walked out and I literally took a deep breath as I walked outside, and you're completely alone. And who was there at the coffee shop? My wife waiting for me, right?
Yep.
It's the most important thing right there. And that's definitely a mindset change from being young, wanting to prove yourself, say, hey, it's that I can do it too. I'm a capable agent. I can investigate and work in a team, and that we can all work together at the speed and fluidity as criminal organizations, because that's very hard to do. And our group of guys, we were able to do that throughout the world. And but at the end of the day, it goes back to that family. They're the ones going to be with you through the career, and the ones that are going to be picking you up at the door when you're done.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love the fact you didn't even hesitate when I asked that question. You knew exactly what it was.
Yeah.
So after living so much of your life behind a mask, now what does living honestly, you're no longer working undercover. What does that mean to you now?
Well, it means that when I have a meeting with somebody, that I don't get to eat drink champagne and steak, and the traditional challenge accepted moment of having the really, really bad guys bring me a gift of a bag of emeralds per se, or the diagram of a pressurized submarine. I no longer have that to do, or have invites to different countries that have submarines that want to be retrofitted and modernized. I don't get to do that anymore. So it's just a little bit different.
Reality, a little bit.
I guess that's also part of the thing that's hard to walk away, to kind of make, because we were essentially making a mini movie everywhere we went, whether it's sitting there and talking about how we want the submarine to be made, and and who we want to man the submarine. That you and Q talked about during your dinner, to being asked to fund coups around the world, and then come back and have to brief my boss, Lee Nash, about that. And he's sitting there with his eyes blinking with a big grin on the side of his face, and so on. Yeah, it's definitely different.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what it takes. It takes imagination. It takes creativity to be successful working undercover.
Yeah.
Do you think that working undercover made you better at reading people, or did it make you worse at trusting them?
That's a good question. And you're pulling out some good ones, Steve.
Well, I don't do many things right, but I can get this right every once in a while.
I think I wouldn't necessarily about reading people, because I think in law enforcement, that's kind of something that you learn through that trade. But I do think it made me pay more attention to global, like what we were doing at the finality of my career. We were representing, or I was representing, that I was head of a global criminal enterprise spanning from weapons, drugs, gold, different, whatever was illicit, that I had hands in people, experts that essentially managed those things for me. Right. So the ability to understand more of the global economics was important, and the ability to really, sit down and understand what people are actually saying, and that words have meaning. Words have power and intention, to be very, very intentional, and also listening to what people are actually saying between the lines. I mean, there was one moment where I remember we were dealing with, I won't get too into it, but we were dealing with I met the godfather of methamphetamine for New Zealand.
Wow.
In a case. And we had dinner with his associate. And I had portrayed that I was the owner of the restaurant, and essentially everyone in the restaurant was an undercover. It's about like 50 people. And we were in Bucharest, Romania. And I remember he had a crazy stutter and a very, very thick accent. It's like Brad Pitt from the movie Snatch. He just kind of jumbled up his words. You couldn't even understand what he was saying. And he was trying to code cocaine. I forget what it was. He was like saying snow or he was just kind of coding it up, and I couldn't understand what he was saying. Plus, you want people to speak clearly when you have an audio recording, right? That's the whole point of having a meeting, right?
Right.
So I remember standing up because we're talking about intention. And I ended up standing up and I yelled as loud as I could. No, I'm sorry. My partner, who was acting as my right-hand guy, a Romanian, excellent guy. He calls a bodyguard over, and I had whispered to him, and I said, "Hey, can we have one of your guys come over?" So he called over one of these big bodyguards, and he goes, "Do you mind if we say the word cocaine in the restaurant?" And the bodyguard says, "Hey, this is your restaurant. You can say whatever you want." So then I stood up and I had my hands and I yelled as loud as I went, "Cocaine!" Like, because I knew everybody in the restaurant was an undercover. Right? So I got a chance to get up and yell really loud, which made the guy who was formidable adversary, if you will, his eyes were like two ostrich eggs just sitting there. And then I got a chance to, with intention, when bravado, explain to him that this is my restaurant, this is my town, this is we can say whatever we want, we're here for business, etc. So, words have meaning, words have power.
So I just want to mention a couple of things that you've been recognized throughout your law enforcement career. While you were still with the Albemarle County Police Department, you were selected as Officer of the Year one year. Also, you were given a Professionalism Award by the Albemarle County Police Foundation, which, I mean, that's significant because you're being recognized by your peers.
Yes, sir.
And you were also given the Criminal Justice Award by the Charlottesville Albemarle County Council on Sexual Abuse and Domestic Violence.
Yes, sir.
And that's in less than a 4-year career, right?
Yes, sir.
So you must have been doing something right there. And then here with DEA, you get the DEA Administrator's Award, which for us is the highest award we can get within DEA when you were investigating an outlaw motorcycle gang in New Zealand and Romania, I think, which is what you were just talking about.
Yes, sir.
And make no mistake about it, ladies and gentlemen, these are outlaw motorcycle gangs. They're not motorcycle clubs. And I know somebody's going to give me a bunch of crap about it because you guys always do. There is a difference, and we know the difference. And then you got now this was pretty impressive. You got a White House Award for your work on the CJNG cartel in Mexico?
Yes.
Well, can you just tell us a little bit about that? What is that?
It was, it's I don't have it in front of the ONDCP. I believe it's the acronym. And I think it's the Office of Drug Control.
Office of National Drug Control Policy.
Yes. And so we ended up getting recognized for that, being and HSI was obviously the head recipient of that, and we were part of that team that we were able to do it, and we accomplished we were told to our face that it was impossible to get this guy who would never even leave his ranch, let alone leave the country of Mexico to travel to Romania. And I'm a really big believer of challenge accepted. Maybe that's something else that it's hard to let go. I'm very big. If someone says you can't do it, I will do everything I can to try to make it happen. And I'm fortunate to have been part of a team, because none of this is me. It's a part of a group team of friends, but also guys that were very, very, very good at what they did. And knowledgeable of their infrastructure, of their organization, and how we can work together. It was the coolest. I saw it once when I was in Guatemala. I'm trying to remember the acronym. It was a group out of Florida where they would do the corridor, the maritime shipping corridor guys. And they came down and they interviewed. We were talking about different cargo shipments, and they worked together as a team. And I was like, man, I want to do that one day, be part of a team of different agencies, but everybody got together. We all were to be friends and work together and have the best of our agencies to make yourselves be fluid. It was awesome to see it. And then also to be a part of it. That was a phenomenal part of our career.
Excellent. Before we go, I want to ask you a little bit more about the one book you've authored, Alejandro and the Bacon Breakfast.
Yes.
Where'd that come from?
Oh, man. It came from a challenging time in her life. Alejandro had some texture sensitivities as part of the autism world, where if you don't cook something in a very particular way, it could be too crunchy or it could be too soft. Like, do you eat oysters?
No.
Steve? Okay.
No. Why
Why don't you eat oysters?
Yeah, because it's like eating snot.
Exactly. I don't either. I think it's gross. Anybody eats oysters, but yuck. Same way. The texture. I can't do it because of the texture. Well, there are some on the spectrum who have that same challenge. Well, at a certain point in our life, about a year, my son only ate bacon. And it wasn't just bacon. It was HEB Naturals bacon, cooked at 400 degrees, and it had to be cooked for a specific amount of time. And I remember one morning I'm going off to work, living my fantasy life, and my wife's in the kitchen and she's having a really hard day because my son's losing weight. She can't get him to eat anything. And no matter how hungry he is, he's not going to eat. The concept that they'll eat when they're hungry is not true. And so I walk out, and on the table, it looked like I was at the Ritz-Carlton 5-star Michelin diamond restaurant. You know, there's bacon and pancakes, waffles, fresh fruit. I mean, everything you could think of was on the table. Scrambled eggs with bacon. And my wife's in tears in the kitchen, and I walk out, and I was like, oh my God, we could write our book. And the reason for the book is my son has an affinity to wanting to have stories. And that was our one way that we as parents could connect with him, is through reading books, because he liked it. So I made a poorly timed joke, I admit, about, hey, we could actually write a book about this, as she's disheveled and in tears. So after 2 weeks of being in the doghouse, we came back and then we decided to kind of put pen to paper and had fun with it. And I'm proud to announce that through a friend, Gordy, if you see this is about you. Again, I like to surround myself with people who say challenge accepted. He told me once that he had friends that were astronauts. And I said, well, if you have friends that are astronauts, get my kid's book that my wife and I wrote on the space station. And he said, challenge accepted. And 2 years later, our kid's book is on board the International Space Station with then Colonel Nick Hague doing a reading of our book. Who would have thought? And then, and this month, we have been highlighted in it's Autism Parenting magazine. It came out. It's a global distribution. And I've also been accepted as a contributor for articles to come in the future to try to move the needle of autism in the world for greater understanding. So, yeah.
Excellent. Still being a hero after DEA.
I don't know about that, but maybe a very hardcore dad. I'll say that.
Well, you know what? I mean, look at today's time where a lot of dads aren't even present.
Yeah.
And dealing with the special needs kids, not an easy thing.
No.
I don't think that the good Lord challenged me with that, because he probably figured I'm a bigger wimp than the challenge that I would be up against.
Yeah.
So, I mean, take the praise that goes with it. It's a responsibility that he gave you. You're living up to it. You're being a man, and you're doing the right thing for your family. It's something to really, really be proud of, brother.
That's what we do. It's what any of us do. When you're given that challenge, you stand up and you take it, and challenge accepted, right?
Yeah. I love it. That's what DEA does.
Yeah.
When you were talking about that, it just reminded me when Mike Braun was chief of operations, and they're at a part of the national intelligence community is having a meeting with, I'm not going to mention names, but they were talking about how they couldn't catch the international merchant of death, Victor Boot.
Oh, Victor Boot. Yeah, right on.
And they looked over at DEA and they said, DEA, you think you're so good? Why don't you see what you can do about that? And Mike Braun said, hold my beer.
Yeah.
And we did. The DEA did it.
Yeah, right so on, man.
Things we're proud of. Do you anticipate writing any more books?
Oh, absolutely. I have put pen to paper. I get a lot of asks to do it, from many different circles. And so, yes, I am doing my share of writing. Definitely want to do another kid's book and just kind of work in that area. But definitely writing about my personal life. And, there's a good role model out there. Two guys, Steve Murphy and Javier Pena, that did something pretty cool. And, I would definitely love to kind of pass on information that I learned in my career as well to law enforcement. That is something I think is, important. And what I have learned teaching autism is law enforcement is a very tough audience. And so I'm trying to crack that nut is a challenge, but challenge accepted.
Excellent. And I'm looking here. You've got a business going, Alpha. Let me get this right here.
That's Alpha Innovative Solutions. Yes.
There you go. And you can, ladies and gentlemen, you can find that at, I'm actually looking at it, AIS101.com. And for you, those of you on YouTube watching this, you're seeing a placard come up now where you can get this information. But if you're listening to this, check out AIS101.com. On Instagram, you can find Chris there at Alpha IS101. And also Adventures with Alejandro. Just recently became subscribers to both of those. On LinkedIn, you can find Chris at Christopher Diaz, D-I-A-Z. And there's a lot of Chris Diaz is on LinkedIn, so you got to look for him, but he's on there. And I told you about his website, his book again, Alejandro and the Bacon Breakfast. It's been on the International Space Station. Do you know any other books that have been up there? I don't. Of course, our listeners are pretty worldwide here. They may know some.
Right on.
Just before I let you go here, Chris, any words of advice that you'd like to offer to anybody considering a career in law enforcement or the military or a high-risk occupation? I mean, you've been out there and done it.
I think you have to be up for the challenge. Obviously, we've said it 1,000 times in this interview. But also know that you can't give up and that you're going to run into a lot of people, who are going to tell you no, and they're going to tell you no a lot, or that's impossible, or that cannot be done. And my words to that is know that maybe those individuals are coming from a place of maybe they've never thought about it, never done it successfully, or there's a fear of failure, and you just have to keep trying and working through that because it can be done.
Don't be afraid to try. I mean, I think you'll agree with this, especially after everything you've told us about your career. Life's an adventure.
Yes.
Take advantage. I mean, good Lord. I mean, even after you retire, look what you're doing. It's still amazing.
Thank you.
And there's so many people that are just, nothing wrong with this, what I'm getting ready to say, but they're just comfortable staying in that little bitty lane that they're in and never get to experience all the stuff that's out there.
My dad said, in life, you have to make a decision. Do you want to read about history or do you want to make history?
There you go.
And I think that's one of the great decisions in life. He also said, you want to be the guy that sits at the bottom of the hill and tells people to run in a charge the machine gun nest, Or do you want to be the guy that's actually running up the hill to charge the machine gun nest? Because that's another important decision that you want to make.
Absolutely. Could have completely different outcomes.
Yeah.
I tell you what, Chris, man, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show, for being patient with me. We first talked before you retired back in 24. And we decided we'd wait till you retire before we did the interview. And then I get busy. There was a lot of changes going on here on the podcast. Morgan had moved on to bigger and better things at the time, and I was still trying to spell podcast. It's been a challenge. But, man, thank you for telling us about these stories. Thank you for your service to our country, because that's exactly what it was. And coming up with ideas that other people had not come up with. It's just fantastic. And that's why I say DEA leads the way. No dig on other law enforcement agencies at all, but it's just amazing. The people that you see in DEA and the concepts that they go through and the sacrifices they make, including with their families. Their families are making the equal sacrifices. So, brother, it's been an honor to have you on here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Steve. I was honored to be here. Thank you very much for sharing just a little bit. And I look forward to continue watching you.
Well, brother, hopefully we'll get to meet in person here someday.
Right on.
All right. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming back every week. I always say this, I couldn't do any of this without you. So your support means the world to me. You keep the show's growing now. Thank you so much for causing that, because I know it's not me. It's the fantastic guests I bring on here, the studs and the studettes. But like we say every week, I often wonder why you continue to come back, but I really know. And you know as well, because you enjoy playing the biggest, the baddest, the most dangerous game of all, and that's our game of crimes. God bless. See you folks next week.